Hello, and welcome to the Substance Use Wellness Session offered by Mental Health and Addiction Services. My name is Charlene Payne, and I'm the Regional Mental Health and Addictions Coordinator in Corner Brook with Western Health. This session is one of a series of wellness sessions that we provide through Mental Health and Addiction Services. These sessions are aimed to provide you with information as well as resources on a variety of topic areas. Today's session will focus on substance use. So the purpose of today's session is to provide you with information about substance use as well as gambling, to provide you with information on the stages of substance use and how addiction develops, to look at the impacts of substance use as well as some attitudes and myths, to also provide an overview of various treatment options and how to provide support to individuals. I will also provide you with some information regarding various programs and services that are available to individuals. I would like to start with talking about attitudes. And just take a moment and think about what or who do you think or picture when you hear the words addiction, addict, alcoholic, or injection drug user. It's important to begin looking at our own attitudes and feelings and beliefs around individuals struggling with substance use or gambling. These are all stigmatizing terms. We would not endorse using these terms. While an individual may choose to apply a label such as this to themselves, we come from a person-first perspective and would encourage others to avoid labeling and judgments. These are some common myths of substance abuse. Some people view it as a character flaw or a sign of weakness. Another myth is that it's voluntary. People choose this, or that it's not going to happen in my family. Another common myth is that change is simple. Change is a very difficult process. Relapse is a sign of failure or of weakness. Also, the attitude that people don't really change and they could stop if they wanted to. It just takes willpower. I just want to point out that addiction can happen to anyone at any time in their lives. No one is immune to this disorder. It could be a friend, a family member, a coworker, a neighbor. Often our attitudes or misconceptions can be attributed to various factors, including cultural messages that we received from family, the media, the community, or our religion. Often a lack of knowledge contributes to myths and stigma and the stigma associated. So again, believing that if you relapse, you have failed, this is inaccurate. Relapse can be a part of the recovery process. And we see it more as an opportunity to learn as opposed to a sign of weakness or failure. And some people are just unsure about what you believe or how you view your own use. And this can impact how you view other people. And then you may judge others as a result. There's also another myth or misconception that once treatment is complete, there is no need for further work. So basically that there's a cure for addiction. However, there is no cure. Addiction is a lifelong condition. Stigma refers to negative attitudes and beliefs about a group of people and their circumstances in life. It includes discrimination, prejudice, judgment, labels, isolation, and stereotypes. There are major negative impacts on the quality of life of people who use or have an addiction, people who are in recovery, and their friends and families. Stigma can make people feel ashamed of their substance use or behavior, which can then prevent them from receiving help if they need or want it. It is also a major barrier to sustaining recovery. And often it's our misconceptions that contribute to this stigma. So there are 3 types of stigma. One is what we refer to as social stigma, when you have negative attitudes or behaviors towards people who use substances or their loved ones. Structural stigma, when healthcare providers or first responders ignore or do not take people with problematic substance use seriously. Then there is self-stigma, when people apply to themselves the negative attitudes and beliefs that they have heard from others. So our words absolutely matter. That being said, it's important to change how we talk about substance use. So if we look at the topic, people who use drugs, instead of using words such as addicts, junkies, users, drug abusers, recreational drug user, instead we can use terms such as people who use substances, people with a substance use disorder, people with lived or living experience, and people who occasionally use substances. Another topic, people who have used substances. So instead of using terms like former drug addict or referring to a person as being clean, we can instead use terms and statements such as people who have used substances, people with lived or living experience, and people in recovery. The topic of drug use, instead of using substance or drug abuse or drug misuse, instead we can use substance or drug use, substance use disorder or opioid use disorder, problematic drug use, or drug dependence. So the language we use has a direct and profound impact on those people around us. Choosing our words carefully is an important first step towards reducing the cycle of stigma surrounding people who use substances. By using compassionate words in place of negative ones, you can make it easier for someone to speak up, to feel heard and understood, or to receive help. So it's important to listen with compassion and without judgment, so that a person who uses substances can feel heard and understood. Speak up when someone is being treated disrespectfully because of their substance use. And be kind with the words you use. Use people first language. And this focuses first on the individual and not the action. So again, people who use substances or people who gamble. So in reality, there are many reasons why people develop substance use and/or gambling problems. So family history can be an indicator. So children who grow up in a family where there is addiction are at higher risk for developing addiction themselves. And this is not always the case, but it does increase a person's risk. Various lived experiences or coping strategies. So people may turn to substances as a way of coping with difficult emotions or difficult situations. They start to rely on substances to regulate their emotions. And lived experiences could be things such as any type of trauma, any type of abuse, neglect, sexual assault, divorce, family conflicts, chaos, or stress. Also, any school or workplace experiences such as bullying, conflict, academic struggles, and other lived experiences could be things such as discrimination. Also, the age that a person starts to use substances may increase a risk for developing substance use disorder. So youth who use are at a higher risk, and the rate of substance use disorder occurs at a faster rate than with adults. Having a peer group that also use substances, so looking at potential peer pressure and easy access to substances. Experiencing mental health issues. So more than 50% of people with substance use disorder have also had mental health problems at some point during their life. When people have mental health problems, even limited substance use can worsen the situation. Sometimes there could be a genetic or biological reason, cultural influences, social influences, so our relationships with other people can influence our behavior as well. So it's important to understand that addiction or substance use disorder is a chronic condition and it is progressive, so it gets worse over time. Having a lack of awareness or insight or different perspectives about the extent of use and the level of negative consequences as a result of the substance use or gambling is common. This can lead to an individual denying a problem and rejecting the need for change. So for example, some people may feel that I'm not an alcoholic because I don't drink in the morning, or I don't drink every day. I don't always drink more than I intend, never get rowdy when I drink, or I've never missed a day's work due to drinking. Relapse can be a part of the process. So rather than seeing it as a sign of failure, we see it as an opportunity to learn. There are often high rates of low self-esteem with individuals struggling with substance use or gambling disorder. And also, again, it can happen to anyone. I always say addiction is one of those things that does not discriminate. It can happen whether you're young, old, rich, poor, male, or female. It can happen to anyone at any time. I would just like to read this quote from Gabor Mate. What a wonderful world it would be if the simplistic view were accurate, that human beings need only negative consequences to teach them hard lessons. That would be a more simple world indeed. Next, I would like to talk briefly about the various types of substances and drugs that are out there. And a drug is any substance which alters or changes how our body and or our mind functions. So sometimes these can be natural or synthetic, and they are used to affect our body and its processes, our mind and our nervous system, as well as our behavior and feelings. And not all drugs are necessarily bad. Some can be used properly to treat medical problems, correct imbalances in our body, protect us against disease, relieve tension, fatigue, and pain. So if a person has high blood pressure, they would take high blood pressure medication to help treat that. Substances can lower our inhibitions and affect our judgment. Therefore, we may do things that we would not normally or usually do. The way a person feels after using a drug depends on the person's age, their weight, how much they've consumed, how the drug is used, their mood, their expectations, and the environment. All of these factors determine how a person will feel and react. Also, the way a drug is prepared will determine the risk. So individuals can never be sure about what chemicals are in a drug or how potent it really is. Also, the manner of use determines the level of risk for a person. So for example, swallowing reduces a peak high, but lengthens intoxication. Sniffing, inhaling, and injecting all result in a drug effect that may be dangerous. There are different classes of substances. The first class are depressant drugs. Depressant drugs slow down the functioning of our central nervous system. So our breathing is slower, our heart rate becomes slower, our blood pressure is lower, our inhibitions are also lowered. It gives us a false sense of confidence. Thinking or speaking is slower, and initially there may be more energy. Stimulant drugs are the opposite effect of depressant drugs. So they speed up our central nervous system. So our breathing, our heart rate, our blood sugar, our blood pressure, all of those things are increased. They provide a sense of euphoria, increases alertness, endurance, and energy, and psychological and physical dependence can develop. The most common depressants we would see would be alcohol. Stimulants would be caffeine, cocaine, cannabis alters mood, thinking, perceptions, and behavior. Some individuals experience a laid back or relaxed feeling. Other individuals may experience paranoia. It affects our short-term memory, motivation, and dependence can develop as well. Hallucinogen drugs. These affect the mind as well as our senses. They cause hallucinations and distort one's sense of reality. It affects perception, emotion, and mental processes. Things like acid or magic mushrooms. Narcotics or opioids are highly addictive pain medication. They produce a sense of euphoria or well-being. They also alter perception. Inhalant drugs, not listed, are a type of depressant drug which produce feelings of euphoria or lightheadedness. They slow down the body functions such as breathing, and use can cause brain damage or death. Gambling is the act of risking money, property, or something of value on an activity with an uncertain outcome. So you're risking something of value on an activity that you're unsure of what the outcome will be. It can provide individuals with a sense of excitement, competitiveness, importance, and other individuals turn to gambling to escape from feelings, problems, and pressures. Gambling can also provide a high or a rush that is similar to when someone uses substances. People can also experience withdrawal symptoms from gambling. Some common types would be video lottery terminals, VLTs, scratch tickets, lotto tickets, bingo, playing cards for money, pool, sports, or darts for money, investing in stock markets, online gambling, or playing Proline. Any of these activities would be considered gambling activities. So there is a continuum of gambling use. So some individuals choose not to gamble, and that could be for various reasons. Social or casual gambling is gambling for a predetermined amount of time and with a fixed amount of money. So for example, a person may play a VLT machine and limit their amount at $20, and that's all they will spend. So they have limits in place and plans, and they are able to restrict their gambling at any time. So it does not cause any problems or challenges in their life. Then an individual may progress onto problem gambling, and this is where a person is investing a considerable amount of time and emotional energy into gambling. So the stakes are higher than the person can afford, so you may be spending more money than you can afford to. And often the gambling causes social problems, work problems, or family problems. When a person continues onto compulsive or pathological gambling, this is a chronic and progressive failure to resist the impulse or urge to gamble. So it refers to gambling behaviors that compromise, disrupt, or damage personal, family, or work pursuits. We often refer to gambling as the hidden substance use disorder because oftentimes family members may not be aware until maybe the person loses their job or they lose their home. So it can be a very secretive condition as well. In terms of the spectrum of substance use, there are different stages and phases as well. So again, some people choose not to use any substances or to drink, and that could be for various reasons. May just not be interested. Experimental use is where a person is usually motivated by curiosity or by their peer group. So a person in this stage may try a substance once or a few times just to see what it's going to do for them. So they want to find out if it's going to be a good experience or not. And whether use continues depends on the person's experience with that substance. So if they had a negative reaction or something really bad happened, they may not return to using that particular substance. There's low tolerance. Use is often unplanned, and again, there are no long-term consequences. Social or occasional use. This is where a person uses a substance in an amount or frequency that is not harmful. So drinking on special occasions or during ceremonial practices. Usually, again, it does not interfere with day-to-day functioning. A person can take it or leave it. Oftentimes, they may plan to use again, but they're able to put limits and plans in place to reduce their risks. Regular or heavy use. is someone who may start to use daily or almost daily. So at first they may have used occasionally, but then started to use to cope and might not be aware that they have lost control over their use. When they stop using, they may experience some withdrawal. You may begin to see solitary use, so using on their own. A loss of interest in day-to-day activities. You may begin to see regular or predictable patterns, so drinking every weekend, or feeling you cannot have a good time without using cocaine. The person in this stage may still feel in control over their use, but they're starting to see some harmful or negative consequences. Examples could be impaired driving, binge drinking, and life areas may start to be affected, such as work, family, relationships. Then you move to substance use disorder. And this is someone who feels they need to use all of the time and becomes irritable when they are not using. This can occur by using a substance too much or too often. It impairs the health or safety of themselves or others around them. Some people may be aware that their substance use causes problems, but they continue to use even when they want to stop. They may use more than they intended or in situations where they did not want to use. They may spend an excessive amount of time getting and using, and they need more of the substance in order to get any desired effects. Substance use disorder is an irresistible compulsion to use alcohol, drugs, or partake in compulsive behavior despite adverse consequences. It also involves two types of dependency. There's physical dependency and psychological dependency. With physical dependency, the body becomes so accustomed to a substance that when taken away, it creates withdrawal symptoms, and this increases the need for that substance. It includes tolerance, so the individual will need more of the substance to accomplish the same feeling as when they began using the substance. So if someone started out drinking 3 beer and it gave them a high or a rush, then over time and with regular use, they may need 8 to get that same effect as when they started using 3. It also includes withdrawal. So withdrawal symptoms are physical symptoms associated with no longer using a substance. So when they do not have that substance in their system, they go through withdrawal. And the withdrawal will be the opposite effect of the substance they were using. So if someone were using cocaine, which is a stimulant drug, then some of the common withdrawal symptoms would be irritability and nightmares, sweats, depression, and things like that. So a cycle starts to happen with that. So the more an individual uses, the more they will need that substance to function normally, to get through each day. And with substance use disorder, use is no longer associated with positive effects. It's using to avoid the pain of withdrawal. That's what life is like for them at that point. With psychological dependency, this is an emotional or mental drive to continue taking a substance to maintain a sense of well-being. So with physical dependency, it's more of needing the drug to avoid withdrawal and to function. Psychological dependency is feeling that you need the substance to feel normal. So in terms of the cycle of dependence here, many individuals experience extreme guilt, shame, and discomfort surrounding their substance use. And the easiest way to deal with these feelings is to use again so they don't need to feel them. More feelings and negative feelings are generated, and that's where you see that cycle developing. Again, substance use disorder is a progressive and chronic illness, and is not necessarily the amount or frequency of substance use which determines the problem, but it's the effects that the substance use or gambling takes on the person's life that determines the problem. Substance use disorder can be diagnosed by a medical doctor. Often it's referred to as a brain disorder or brain disease now as well. And if we look at the reward pathway in our brain is responsible for drive and reward. So it makes us feel good when we do things that are needed for survival, such as eating. It is connected to parts of the brain, including our 5 senses. When our senses tell us something feels good, neurons release dopamine, which gives you a small jolt of pleasure. To get you to repeat that behavior, the reward pathway is connected to the part of the brain that controls memory and behavior. Dopamine plays an important role in controlling our drive to seek out rewards and obtain a sense of pleasure. It affects our motivation, memory, our senses, our emotional responses, our motor control, and hormone regulation. Serotonin is involved in controlling many functions, including our sleep, aggression, eating, sexual behavior, as well as our moods. So substance use disorder affects neurotransmission and interactions within our reward structures of the brain, such that motivational hierarchies are altered and addictive behaviors, which may or may not include alcohol, substance use, they replace our healthy self-care related behaviors. Substance use disorder is a primary chronic disease of brain reward, motivation, memory, and related circuitry. Dysfunction of these circuits leads to biological, psychological, social, and spiritual manifestations. The individual pursues reward and or relief by substance use and other behaviors. Drugs bypass our 5 senses and they directly activate the reward pathway, fast and hard. They give a jolt of intense pleasure by dumping dopamine in your brain. As the brain tries to adapt to this, regions outside of the reward pathways are affected. Drugs and gambling change the brain, change its structure, and how it works. So people and animals will continue to repeat a behavior that feels good. Eventually, the brain stops producing the natural feel-good chemicals on their own, and they wait for the drugs to do the job for them. Drugs interfere with how the nerve cells normally send, receive, and process information. So individuals crave the effect of the drug, not the drug itself. So they're looking for that pleasure effect. Looking at youth or the teenage brain, so starting use at a young age can prevent or slow down development in the brain, resulting in difficulty learning important skills such as coping, decision-making, judgment, memory, organization, and planning. Keep in mind that our brain is continually developing up until around our mid-20s, maybe around 24 to 26 years of age. It's during this critical time that they learn these executive functioning skills of judgment, decision-making, coping skills. So this is a critical time. And as a result, when we compare youth substance use versus adult substance use, oftentimes substance use disorder can develop more quickly in youth. The reasons that they use substances are more internal. So it's a difficult and challenging time for youth. They're trying to find their way in this world, trying to find out where they fit and where they belong. So guidance is very helpful and important to them. They often use more than one substance. And also levels of treatment are different for youth than with adults. I just want to reiterate the cycle of substance use disorder or addiction. Again, a person is experiencing some type of pain. It could be physical pain, emotional pain. They reach out and look for substances to give them a sense of temporary relief. So whether that gives them an increased sense of courage, decreased inhibitions, a sense of euphoria, or escaping from problems. In terms of physically, it gives them temporary relief in terms of energy, lightheadedness, their eyes may change. It can increase or decrease appetite, help with sleep, or help with pain. When a person stops using, they will again go through and experience withdrawal symptoms. So problems will return and may be more intense. Anxiety or depression, guilt, fear, anger, regret, shame, or embarrassment. Physically, they may experience headaches, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, diarrhea, sleeplessness, pain, or loss of appetite. Then a person may experience negative consequences. They experience that withdrawal, they feel shame and guilt, and the easiest way to manage those painful experiences is to use again. So that's where you see a cycle developing. I want to show you a video, and the video is called Nuggets. And it's a story about a little Kiwi who's struggling with addiction. So it revolves around the journey of a solitary Kiwi and the occasional bumps it finds in the road. I really like that simplistic version and depiction of what it is like to live with substance use disorder. In the beginning, the kiwi is just doing its own thing, comes across a little nugget, passes by the first one or two, but then chooses to use. It gives the nugget a feeling of bliss or a feeling of joy or excitement. But over time, each nugget it comes across gets bigger and bigger, but that feeling of bliss gets shorter and shorter, and life suddenly becomes dark and becomes unmanageable without that nugget for the kiwi. So it's very similar to someone living with addiction and substance use disorder. In the beginning, the substance use or the gambling serves some kind of purpose, or it gives them a sense of something that they're looking for. It fills some gap. But over time, it's no longer about that pleasure or about that feeling. It's about getting through each day as best you can. Substance use disorder is a complex condition that impacts all areas of a person's life. So we look at this as a biopsychosocial model. It impacts a person physically, psychologically, socially, culturally, as well as spiritually. It can impact a person's finances, housing, work or school, relationships. It impacts all of these areas of a person's life. So very much so, it becomes a disorder that impacts everyone in that person's life, not just the individual living with the addiction. There are some primary characteristics of substance use disorder, and it is a disease like any other. It's no different than someone learning how to live with diabetes or heart issues or other chronic conditions. It's a chronic condition. It involves a loss of control, so the inability to control their gambling or substance use. They are unable to predict or control how much they use or when they use, so they feel a sense of powerlessness. Again, tolerance occurs, and they cannot foresee the outcome of their behaviors. Also involves preoccupation. So the devotion of a great deal of time is spent either anticipating, so thinking about, planning, and protecting their gambling or substance use behaviors. They have thoughts of using that have taken a permanent residency in their minds. That's their main focus. Their top priority is using or gambling. It also involves denial. And some individuals may not see that their substance use or gambling is out of control or that it's causing problems. But this can simply be a lack of knowledge or awareness into the situation as well. They continue to view their substance use or gambling as optional when truly it is not. They may start to employ a controlled use philosophy. So if I just cut back on how much I use or how often. They often displace blame. So they often blame other people, situations, or other things for their behavior. And they ignore substance-related problems and consequences. So how do you know when you've crossed that line, or you may be progressing into substance use disorder? So how do you know if it's becoming a concern? So using too much or too often, you feel that lack of control, using for the wrong reasons. So are you using to feel more confident or because you're stressed, or are you using to cope with mental illness? Does your use or gambling affect one or more areas of your life? So again, your health, your work, your family, your relationships. Are you experiencing psychological or physical dependency? So do you experience withdrawal when you're not using or gambling? So can you take it or leave it? Do you feel that the substance use or the activity is controlling you? Do you become very protective over your use? If someone challenges you or asks you, do you become defensive? Other things to look out for would be behavior changes. So are you isolating yourself more? Changes in your peer group, changing in your attitudes or beliefs. More secretive, uncooperative, or more moody or irritable, more anxious or argumentative, lack of motivation, more hangovers, defensive, a change in your sleeping or eating habits, experiencing depression or high anxiety, pulling away from routine family activities, increase in borrowing money, or if there are missing prescription medications. These are all some signs or things that you can watch out for. Signs of drug paraphernalia. So things like cigarette papers, small pipes, pills, powder, or other substances, blackened knives, cans or bottles with holes in them, eye drops or sunglasses, use of incense or room deodorant to hide smoke or chemical odors, pacifiers or lollipops used for jaw clenching and teeth grinding, candy necklaces or bags of small candies used to hide pills, evidence of inhalant drug use such as hairspray, paper bags, rags, correction fluid, razor blades, straws, small tubes for snorting powder, syringes, needles, or spoons, bandanas, or belts will be signs of drug paraphernalia. So the impact of substance use disorder on the individual can range from mild, so experiencing hangovers or being late for work, or they could go to the extreme of becoming homeless, experiencing and developing chronic diseases, or overdose. While each time a person uses a substance may seem to have little impact, the harmful consequences can build up over time. So things like injuries while a person is under the influence, feelings of anxiety, irritability, or depression, difficulty in thinking clearly, so a foggy kind of thinking, experiencing blackouts. Blackouts are not the same as a person passing out. Blackouts are periods of time where a person has no memory of things they did. That could last hours or days or even weeks. Spending money on substances rather than on essentials such as food, rent, clothing, paying your bills. A person may start to experience legal problems related to their use. A feeling of loss of hope and of emptiness. Difficulties in relationships. Can impact a person's self-esteem, a sense of spirituality, impact their leisure or social activities, education, work, relationships, their health, significant others. So the impacts of substance use are far-reaching. topic I want to talk about is providing support to individuals who may be experiencing substance use or gambling problems. Because addiction deserves the same care and compassion we give any other disease or chronic condition. So individuals under the influence should and can be held accountable for their behavior, but never confront them while he or she is under the influence of substances. You always want to ensure that the person's immediate safety needs are met. So for example, making sure that they are not driving any motorized vehicle and making sure they are medically safe. If intoxication appears severe, it is important to know whether the person is in a stimulated state, a depressant state, or experiencing distorted perception. So if a person is in a stimulant state, you should reduce the stimulants in the environment. So turning down the lights, turning off music or television. If the person is in a depression state, you should increase stimulation in the environment. So turning on the lights, keep talking to the person or checking in on them, turning on some music or television. And if the individual is experiencing distorted perception, reassure the person that what they are experiencing and feeling is not real, but it's the effects of the substance. And stimulation, again, should be reduced in the environment. It's important to use reflective listening. So this means that the central questions for the listener are not, what can I do for this person? Or how do I see this person? But rather, how does this person see themselves and their situation? So it's starting to put yourself in that person's situation for a moment and think about what they're experiencing. In reflective listening, the listener tries to clarify and restate what the other person is saying. There are communication cues to let the talker know that you are listening without taking them away from their train of thought. So, for example, tell me about that. Or, I hear you, I'm listening. And also paying attention to our nonverbal body language. Using open responses as well as using I statements are important. So here are some do's and don'ts in how to respond and communicate with someone who may have a substance use disorder. So don't ignore the problem. Don't argue with the person. Don't judge the person. And don't push them for treatment. What you want to do instead of these things is to raise your concerns with the person and let them know that you are available to listen to them. Instead of arguing, you want to provide accurate and factual information about the issue. If they get angry or denies there is an issue, be patient but persistent. Do be positive and encourage change instead of blaming the person or making them feel guilty. Also find out about treatment options or programs and tell the person about them. They must be the one to decide to make a change. So when dealing with difficult behaviors, it's important to try to stay calm, stick to the facts, keeping things simple, being honest, not making auto threats, and recognizing that the only person you can change is yourself. Some more tips for supporting someone is to give hope. So remind the person that no matter how hard the struggle, that recovery is possible. Ask the person how you can be a supportive and person and create a safe environment. So would the person prefer it if alcohol were removed from the home? So how can you support that person? Learn as much as you can about the causes, signs, and symptoms of problematic substance use. This will help you to understand and support your loved one in recovery. Communicate positively, directly, and clearly. State what you want to happen rather than criticizing your loved one for past behaviors. Avoiding personal criticism can help the individual feel accepted while they are making difficult changes. Encourage the person to follow their treatment plan. So encourage the person to attend treatment sessions and to use the support from their counselor or their group. Support the person's efforts to avoid things that may trigger substance use or gambling. As your loved one recovers, encourage them to begin to take back some of the responsibilities and connections that might have been disrupted during active addiction. So getting back the healthier parts of their life, such as family, friends, work, or hobbies, can help to maintain changes and to rebuild a more balanced relationship with family members. Finally, recognize that recovery may not be completely smooth. Relapse is often a part of the recovery process. Have realistic expectations and encourage realistic goals. Prepare a plan for your response to relapse if it should occur. A relapse can escalate to a return to problem use. If this occurs, decide on your actions and limits and communicate these clearly to your loved one. I want to take a moment to talk about enabling a person versus support. So enabling is certain behaviors that allow the addictive behavior to continue. So enablers often take responsibility for the behavior, feelings, and decisions of the person who is using. The enabler often shields the person from experiencing the consequences of his or her substance use or gambling, and makes it easier for them to continue to use. So for example, things like giving money or making excuses for the person, calling in sick for them at work, as well as ignoring natural consequences. Healthy detachment is a process where a loved one frees themselves emotionally from the person and focuses on their own needs and problems. So healthy detachment does not mean giving up or giving the person the okay to continue to use substances or to gamble. It does mean making sure you are emotionally well enough to support your loved one through this time. So how to disengage would be to not take any anger personally. Don't confront the person if they are angry or intoxicated. Avoid saying things that you don't mean. Never use violence. Don't nag or constantly remind the person of the effects of substance use or gambling. Don't try to fix the problems. Don't make excuses about their use. And keep reminding yourself that you are not to blame for your loved one's substance use disorder. It's not your fault. The next section I want to talk about is treatment options as well as recovery. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to addiction treatment. Choosing the appropriate treatment depends on the severity and type of the addiction, the support from family and others, and a person's motivation to change. So services and supports should be flexible and tailored to the needs of the individual. By matching people with the services that fit their needs, they can have a better chance of sustained recovery because there is life after addiction. So when a person is starting to change any behavior in their lives, we often think that it's linear, that we can go from point A to point B. But what success really looks like is an intermingled line where, things happen in life, things change. So it's not a linear process. Recovery and change do not just happen, it takes time. It's important for a person to set realistic and manageable goals, to be prepared for bumps in those roads, reward yourself for any accomplishment you make, and always staying alert. So even if you're not willing at this time to completely abstain from substance use or gambling, the discussion today can help in other areas of your life as well, such as stress management, self-esteem, relationships. So sometimes the simplest answer is often the most difficult. We need to understand the person's point of view, what their barriers or challenges are, insight into how the individual thinks or how they believe gives us information for helping them make a plan for change. So we aim to help increase a person's awareness of how substance use affects their lives, what puts them at risk of substance use or gambling, and how to reduce their risks. We want to help people examine their thoughts and their emotions and learn how these inner experiences affect how they behave, how they interact with other people, and how other people see them. We want to help promote physical, emotional, and spiritual wellness. We want to help people manage cravings and temptations or urges to use substances or to gamble. We want to help people meet their needs. So it could be things such as learning assertive communication. And we want to help people find ways to build quality supports and to meet people and form relationships that are not focused on substance use or gambling. Some early coping skills in recovery. When a person is first going through recovery, it's important to look at their high-risk people, places, and things. So what are the high-risk situations that put them most at risk for relapse? So learning how to say no, for example, can be very challenging. If someone is offered, saying no requires practice, and in many cases, saying no is not enough. So looking at practicing saying no, looking the person in the eye, tell them that you're no longer using. Suggest an alternative activity. Change the subject. Remind yourself about your goals, or think about negative consequences. Sometimes a person may need to leave the situation altogether and to not feel guilty about refusing. Feel good about yourself for not. So identifying those high-risk people, places, and things that can put you at risk for relapse. So this could be a home or a friend's home, a bar, or people who you use with or buy from or sell to. Having drug paraphernalia around, smoking or alcohol use can put you at risk as well. Stressful situations is important to manage in early recovery, such as finances, housing, emotional, family needs. Grief and loss is a normal part of the human experience. And grief is a normal reaction to any kind of loss, including saying goodbye to substance use or gambling. So what have I lost, or what will I lose in recovery? And exploring their feelings around this sense of loss. Helping them with healthy boundaries, managing urges or cravings, and looking at self-esteem. Helping them regain a sense of self. overall treatment options, some individuals are abstinence-based goals or treatment. So individual completely abstains or no longer uses a substance or gambling. Harm reduction approaches is where an individual chooses to continue using while implementing strategies to help them reduce the risks of harm or consequences. So if you're looking at controlled use, things like a pre-decided amount of time, if you exceed your limits, you have lost control. So for example, if I say, okay, we're gonna have 2 beer on Friday or Saturday nights, or gambling $20 per week on bingo. If I exceed those rules that I have in place, then I've moved beyond harm reduction. Community-based treatment options are available, which also includes online supports, and inpatient treatment may be necessary as well. So for example, the Humberwood Treatment Center or the Grace Treatment Center. Treatment can include a combination of various approaches, depending again on the individual needs. So cognitive behavioral therapy is where we support individuals to recognize the connection between their thoughts, their feelings, and their behavior. The goal is to support individuals to change their thinking, to recognize new feelings, and change behaviors. So for example, if a person has a thought that it wasn't that bad, or I don't have a problem because I'm not as bad as so-and-so, this type of thinking would make someone feel less guilty, less upset, and then they can justify going and using again. So treatment here is about breaking through these faulty beliefs or thoughts in order to change behavior. Motivational interviewing is an effective method for enhancing brief intervention with individuals. It is in contrast to confrontation because it is client-centered and it involves the stages of change. Relapse prevention is a huge part of a person's treatment because again, relapse can be a part of the recovery process. So it's working with individuals to understand the relapse process, to help them learn coping skills they need to deal with triggers and high-risk situations. It involves changes in attitudes, feelings, behavior, and thoughts. We focus on handling social pressures to use, seeking and building supports, having a resource list, identifying and coping with high-risk situation, and identifying and coping with cravings. We also focus on skills training, so helping individuals learn new skills such as relaxation techniques, stress management, anger management, spirituality, meditation or mindfulness practice, self-esteem, leisure activities, coping skills, social supports, problem solving, family relationships, boundaries, and overall wellness promotion. Harm reduction, again, is another approach which I will discuss shortly. So when we are looking at changing any type of behavior, we tend to go through these stages. And everyone cycles through these stages as they attempt to change a behavior. And it's also natural for people to recycle through or revisit earlier stages. That would be things like relapses or sliding backwards. This is not unusual. So the first stage is what we call pre-contemplation, or not really considering the possibility of change. A person does not feel there is a problem, or they're unwilling to consider change. So statements such as, I don't have a problem. I can stop if I wanted to. I only use on weekends or my days off. So the goal in working with an individual at this stage is to raise awareness of the problem, to help them make connections. So a person's not ready yet at this stage. Then they move on into contemplation or thinking about change. in the near future. People are starting to evaluate their options, but they are not quite ready to take action. So I see it as they're sitting on the fence. So I might have a problem. I might need to slow it down a bit. Sometimes I get overboard. So the goal at this stage is to build motivation and confidence in their ability to change. Preparation is when a person is starting to make a plan for change. They're starting to set gradual goals and making a commitment to change. So for example, this is serious and I have to stop. I will stop by this time next month. So they're starting to plan. And the cons of my use outweigh the pros. So the goal at this stage is to negotiate a plan for change. Then they move into the action stage, and this is where they are implementing their behavior change plan. So they're taking action steps, adopting skills and tools to prevent relapse. So for example, I know I cannot go to the wedding. There will be alcohol or drugs there. I can't be around you if you use. I cannot go near the house, street, or store that my substance is. So the goal in this stage is to implement the plan. Maintenance is a continuation of the desirable actions, and they're integrating change into his or her lifestyle. So they've created a new lifestyle that I call free from their addiction. That's what recovery is. So I know that if I go to that party, I will want to drink or use. So what is my backup plan? They're looking at plans to maintain your commitment to change, and the goal is to maintain change or living the new lifestyle. And again, relapse or sliding backwards is not uncommon, and that's a previous pattern of substance use or gambling. A person can feel disappointment or feelings of failure or a setback, but again, we see it as a learning opportunity. So I used last night, but this is a new day and I'm going to start over again. So the goal is reaffirming their commitment to change, looking at what led to their relapse so that they can learn new ways of doing things to avoid that in the future. Harm reduction is a philosophy that includes a range of support services and strategies to enhance knowledge, skills, and resources with the aim of keeping people safe and minimizing death, disease, and injury from high-risk behaviors. And why it's important is that we recognize that abstinence is not always realistic or desired, and we must meet the person where they are. So a person may not be in a physical or psychological position to understand the harms associated with their use, or that change is possible. Harm reduction can provide immediate practical actions. It can provide a person with a sense of hope and can stabilize or prevent further deterioration. So it's more about supporting each individual to improve his or her quality of life and achieve their own goals. So recognizing that individuals are experts in their own lives. Harm reduction is another way we can provide support while also reducing the negative impacts and risks to loved ones and the larger community. It's helping a person to decrease the negative consequences of their substance use. Abstinence is not rejected, but it's not the only long-term goal. And it starts where the person is or what is most problematic in their life. And it's a non-judgmental approach. Some examples would be needle exchange programs. So like our SWAP program, which provides clean needles for injection substance users. Methadone maintenance or Suboxone is our opioid dependency treatment team. Safe and sterile disposal sites and supplies, again, this would be SWAP. Health and drug information and education, HIV and STD screening, counseling, sharp strap boxes, having designated drivers, using nicotine gum or patch would be considered harm reduction, following low-risk guidelines, and naloxone kits. Naloxone is a safe, highly effective chemical compound that reverses the effects of opiates, such as dilated Demerol, fentanyl, and heroin. It will only work for drugs in this category, so the opioid family, and it's used for overdose. So please note that naloxone does not replace professional medical treatment and emergency medical assistance. This should always be requested when opioid overdose is suspected. Naloxone kits are free and available through any mental health and addictions offices or the SWAP program. There are low-risk drinking guidelines for alcohol. And again, these are guidelines meant to help an individual prevent developing a substance use disorder, so reducing your harms and risks associated with using. So keep in mind that a standard drink means a 12-ounce of beer with a 5% alcohol content, or a cooler, a 5-ounce glass of wine with a 12% alcohol content, or any other distilled alcohol, 1.5 ounce. All of these have the same amount of ethyl alcohol. So we want to reduce your long-term health risks by drinking. For women, it's no more than 10 drinks a week with no more than 2 drinks a day on most days. For men, it's no more than 15 drinks a week with no more than 3 drinks a day on most days. It's also important to plan non-drinking days every week to avoid developing a habit. I also want to take a moment and talk about binge drinking. So reduce your risks of injury and harm by drinking no more than 3 drinks for women or 4 drinks for men on any single occasion. Any more than that would be considered binge drinking. Some would argue that this is not problematic because it seems like the norm or acceptable in our culture in Newfoundland and Labrador. However, this is not the norm, and it would be considered problematic across the country as well as other parts of the world. Also consider that it takes approximately 60 to 90 minutes for one standard drink to metabolize in your liver and for the alcohol to leave your system. So for example, if you were drinking until 5 a.m. and had to work at 8 a.m., you would still be intoxicated and could be charged with impaired driving if you drove any motorized vehicle. So knowing your limits, staying within the weekly limits, and planning to drink in a safe environment is very helpful. Some safer drinking tips would be to set limits for yourself and sticking to those limits. Drinking slowly, so no more than 2 drinks in any 3 hours. For every drink of alcohol, have 1 non-alcoholic drink. Eat before and while you are drinking. Always consider your age, your body weight, and health problems that might suggest lower limits. And while drinking may provide benefits for certain groups of people, do not start to drink or increase your drinking for health benefits. There are also some recommendations to suggest ways to use cannabis more safely based on best available scientific evidence. So these are lower risk guidelines as well. So every form of cannabis use poses a risk to your health. So the only way to completely avoid these risks is by choosing not to use. But if you do choose, you can follow these recommendations to lower your risks to your health. So you will lower your risk of cannabis-related health problems if you choose to start using cannabis later in life. And if you choose low-strength products, such as those with a lower THC content or a higher ratio of CBD to THC. You want higher CBD percentages. Don't use synthetic cannabis products. Smoking cannabis is the most harmful way of using because it directly affects your lungs. So there are other safer non-smoking options. If you choose to smoke cannabis, avoid inhaling deeply or holding your breath. This may lead to more lung problems. Try to limit your use as much as possible to maybe occasional use or once a week or only on a weekend is a good way to reduce your risk. Cannabis also impairs your ability to drive or operate other machinery. So don't engage in these activities after using cannabis or while you are still affected by cannabis in any way. So these effects could last up to 6 hours or longer, depending on the person and the product used. So individuals with personal or family history of psychosis or substance use problems and pregnant women should not use cannabis at all. And avoid combining any of the risky behaviors described above. So to keep yourself safe, always purchase from a licensed local or online retailer. Avoid harmful smoking practices such as inhaling deeply or holding your breath. It's also important to keep cannabis products in a safe place where your children cannot reach it. If your child accidentally eats or drinks cannabis, seek medical attention right away. Should you experience severe symptoms from cannabis use, such as disorientation, shaking, shortness of breath, and/or vomiting, seek medical attention right away. It may indicate an overdose. With cannabis edibles, it's always important to read the labels because they vary in THC levels. So start with no more than 2.5 milligrams of THC. So starting low and going slow. With edibles, you will feel the effects within 30 minutes to 2 hours of ingesting. The peak effects would be within 4 hours, and the length of the effects can last up to 12 hours after use, and some can last up to 24 hours. This can be dangerous because if individuals are eating or using edible cannabis and expecting an immediate reaction or feeling, they may use more. And when that peak reaches in 4 to 6 hours, you may have that risk for overdose. So it's important to watch yourself with that. I want to talk about the opioid dependency treatment. And this is an interdisciplinary team approach which provides access to healthcare, individual counseling, medication treatment, and links with other community agencies. So it is a hub and spoke model for treatment. So it involves a nurse practitioner, nurse, addiction counselors, LPNs, peer supporters as well. It comes from the Provincial Opioid Action Plan, which also is looking at ensuring that all pharmacies are connected to the pharmacy network, improving access to effective treatment options as an alternative to methadone, such as Suboxone, and development of a public awareness program on opioids. So it involves a connection between addiction treatment and primary care medical practices. It's again recovery focused and person-centered. And the goal is to decrease opioid poisonings or death through a harm reduction and team approach. So the benefits is decreased use of other opioids or substances, decreased criminal activity, decreased mortality, decreased injection-related risk behaviors, improved social functioning, and the ODT costs are much lower than any untreated opioid dependency. So how methadone and Suboxone work, they are long-acting opioids which are taken once a day. They diminish the euphoric effects of other opioids. They also work to decrease the cravings and symptoms of withdrawal for 24 to 36 hours. Oral ingestion decreases the risks associated with injection drug use, and tolerance develops slowly and drops very quickly. Some other tips or suggestions on how to stay safe, reduce your risks of harm, and preventing relapse during difficult times. It's important to practice moderation. Although alcohol, cannabis, or other drugs may help you to relax or cope with stress, it's important to limit or avoid use to reduce long-term impacts. So buy safer. Always purchase products and equipment from a licensed retailer. Take breaks or days off from substance use or gambling. Avoid vaping liquid cannabis extracts or pods. Cannabis products vary in THC or CBD levels, so always read the label. If you're concerned about you or a loved one's substance use or gambling, reach out. And when 0 is the limit, is when you are responsible for the safety of others, someone with an illness or children. If you are driving a vehicle or using machinery, if you are pregnant or planning to be pregnant, or if you are taking medication or drugs that may interact. Some tips for staying safe and reducing your risks and harms. Make sure you wash your hands and keep your space clean. Prepare any drugs yourself. Minimize the need to share items such as pipes, joints, or injecting supplies. And always carry naloxone if you are at risk for overdose. In early recovery and relapse prevention, talk to your family or friends about your recovery and that you are no longer using or gambling. You may have to change your contact information, such as your telephone or Facebook account. Have someone handle your money for you to reduce your risk of relapse. You can have checks deposited into your account. Try new leisure activities or hobbies. Avoid high-risk people, places, and things. And stay connected with supports, such as self-help, family, friends, counseling, online. Practicing relaxation techniques, again, very helpful, such as deep breathing exercises. And again, carrying naloxone in case of overdose. I like this Bruce Lee quote, "A wise man can learn more from a foolish question than a fool can learn from a wise answer." I'd now like to talk about recovery and what life in recovery is like. Recovery gives me freedom. It gives me choice. It allows me to follow my dreams. I am no longer chained to my addiction. I always refer to recovery as a process of self-discovery. It's about reclaiming your sense of personal power and no longer allowing the addiction to control your life. Recovery refers to the ways in which people with mental health and/or addiction problems experience their lives through focusing on positives such as hope or health and choices, respect, supports, and equity. Recovery approaches stand on 2 pillars. First, they recognize that each person is a unique individual with the right to determine his or her own path towards health and well-being. Second, they also understand that we all live our lives in complex societies where many intersecting factors such as biological, psychological, social, economic, cultural, and spiritual. And these factors have an impact on our overall health and well-being. There are various reasons why people choose recovery and want to begin recovery. And that's for quality of life reasons. So referring to their life during active addiction as being unmanageable or chaotic or out of control or lacking of meaning. I was miserable and broken. I was a slave to alcohol. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I did not want to live anymore. I was going to die if I did not stop. So their quality of life were reasons and motivating factors for seeking supports. Mental health or emotional reasons. So some individuals may feel hopeless or embarrassed, depression, a lack of self-worth, or even suicidal before they started their recovery. Marital, family, or other relationship reasons. Family reasons are often described as motivating factors for individuals to begin recovery. They expressed a desire to save their marriage or relationship with their children, or to stop exposing their children to a life of addiction. Other individuals have physical health reasons for starting recovery. Losing their overall health, their well-being, or being homeless. For principles of recovery, there are various pathways. It involves a process of personal growth along a continuum leading to abstinence. It includes supports such as peer support, early identification and intervention, outreach, specialized treatment, relapse prevention, and continuing care. So there are various pathways to recovery. Recovery requires collaboration. Recovery-focused systems require collaboration across sectors, including peer support or self-help, health, social, educational, criminal justice, employment, economic, spiritual, and housing sectors. So it's building partnerships. Recovery is also a personal journey towards well-being, and it's an ongoing and dynamic process that is unique to the individual's strengths, culture, gender, personal qualities, and experiences. So every person is unique. So therefore, their recovery will be unique to them. Recovery extends beyond the individual. It involves family members, their peers, friends, co-workers, and the community. It's also multidimensional. So it enhances our physical, social, mental, emotional, and our spiritual health. And recovery also involves everyone. So everyone has a role to play in overcoming stigma of addiction and in supporting and celebrating recovery. So recovery includes, again, adopting a new healthy lifestyle consisting of physical activity, healthy eating, self-care, and relaxation. So oftentimes people may not eat healthy or sleep well during the addiction process. So getting back into healthy eating, maybe looking at any vitamins that you may need to incorporate. So basically relearning healthy eating, self-care, and physical activity. It also involves a person to become accountable and responsible for themselves and their choices that they make. It doesn't necessarily move in one direction. It implies learning from setbacks and having the courage to move forward in spite of them. Recovery does not necessarily mean that people will never again experience cravings or go through hard times or relapse. So learning how to live life to the fullest after addiction recovery. So again, recovery is a process. I always tell individuals that addiction or substance use disorder does not develop overnight. It's a process and it develops over a period of time. So does recovery. We often want recovery and we want it yesterday, but it is a process. It does take time. We encourage family members to become involved in a person's recovery as well as recovery for the family. Having access to a support system. It involves self-empowerment and growth. So again, helping them reclaim their sense of personal power and no longer allowing the addiction to maintain control. It also involves increased coping skills and attending to other areas of life, whether that could be grief, loss issues, trauma, employment, or going back to school, healthy eating, accessing safe or affordable housing, managing finances, or developing parenting skills, relaxation skills. Self-help programs are strongly encouraged, or other community groups or organizations. So things such as AA, NA, GA, Al-Anon for family members. Employee assistance programs can be a support. Community groups, family doctors, clergy, a teacher or guidance counselor, private practice counselors, mental health and addiction services, or trusted friends or family members. So recovery is about a person breaking free from the power of the addiction and reclaiming themselves, no longer defining themselves as their addiction. They are a person living with an illness. 91% of people reported a positive quality of life in recovery, and that was taken from the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction. So again, it's important to reach out for supports because you don't have to do everything alone. So asking yourself, who is in your support network? And making a list of people in your life that could help. So family, friends, coworkers, again, other self-help groups, community groups, AIDS Committee of Newfoundland and Labrador, reading the SWAP program, any reading and online resources, counseling. Who can you go to for emotional support? Who do you go for moral support to give you a sense of encouragement? Who do you see as a mentor, someone who provides you with guidance or instruction? Who can you ask for instrumental support, such as childcare, transportation, homework? Who do you have that gives you a sense of companionship or a sense of belonging? A certain loved one or pet? And who do you go for to get accurate information? Mental health and addiction services is a service offered to individuals who may be experiencing a challenging time in their lives. We support individuals who are living with mental health and or addiction issues, as well as their families. There are various programs and services provided within mental health and addiction services, such as individual, group, family, or couples counseling, consultation services, education and skill development, referral to other services or community groups, aftercare and follow-up services once service is complete, Doorways, our single session walk-in service. Group sessions, inpatient assessments and referrals, prevention and promotion services, therapy assisted online, and many of our groups are offered online as well. Anyone can make contact with a mental health and addiction services office to make a self-referral or a referral on behalf of someone else, as long as that person is consenting to the referral being made. So here is a list of various crisis and helpline information. Our mental health crisis line is 24 hours, 7 days a week. Crisis text line, where you text TALK to 686868. Kids help phone, channel warm line. Our First Nations and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline. Newfoundland and Labrador Sexual Assault Crisis and Prevention 24-hour line. The Smokers Helpline, and our Newfoundland and Labrador Health Line, 811. We also have a mental health and addictions systems navigator. And this person helps individuals, family members, as well as service providers. It serves as a central point of contact for provincial mental health and addiction services and supports. It helps to improve the client's and individual's mental health journey by increasing knowledge and awareness, identifying and addressing any systems barriers, and improving coordination among services, while ensuring continuity of care across services. So if you are wondering where you can access supports, resources in your area, you can contact the Mental Health and Addiction Systems Navigator, and they will provide you guidance on where to go for supports. The number is 1-877-999-7589. We also have our provincial website, which is bridgethegap.ca, and GAP is with 2 P's. This is a website that provides you with instant access on a variety of mental health and addiction topics, which provides advice, inspiration, assurance, or direction for finding additional supports when you need it the most. There are sections for adults, as well as a section for youth to access the website. This website is available free on your computer, tablet, or phone. It includes a service directory with links to self-help and counselor-assisted programs, provides you with resources, information booth, online programs, access to those, as well as a toolbox where you can access various relaxation techniques and information. We also have a website, checkitoutnl.ca. That's checkitoutnl.ca. And this is a free website. It's anonymous for you to get a mental health checkup. It's online screening tools for adults 18 years and older. You answer a series of questions based on how you are feeling. Then you will get results, as well as recommendations and resources that you can avail of. So complete a screening and find out how your mental health is. Doorways, again, is our single session walk-in service, which provides rapid access to mental health and addictions counseling services, 1 session at a time. This service is available for individuals 12 years and older. While most locations throughout the province offer a walk-in service, some locations provide same day, next day, or appointments by phone. Please contact your local mental health and addiction services office for further information. This concludes our substance use wellness session. I would like to thank you all for joining and listening to this session. and I hope that you found some of the information helpful for you or a loved one who may be experiencing problems with substance use or gambling. Again, my name is Charlene Payne, and I'm the Regional Mental Health and Addictions Coordinator. Thank you for joining. Take care and have a great day.